give her a big round of applause, Savitri Wilson, for the launch of her second book today. This woman is amazing. As we all know, she's founded 2 companies. Now she's the writer, author of 2 books, which is so exciting. And so today we're going to talk about her books, but we're also going to talk about her story. And I'd love to get you guys involved in the conversation. So I'll ask her questions. We'll have a conversation for about 30 minutes, and then I'll open the floor to you guys if you have anything you want to say. I'll let you know when we're ready for Q&A. I think you need her attention for a second. Okay. Okay, see, that's a real friend. We appreciate you. We among family today. All right, we among family. All right, Savitri, so you know I love you. Read the first book, was so excited to get the second book. Tell us what made you want to write this second book. It's called Resilient, How to Overcome Anything and Build a $1 million Business with or Without Capital.
So, a little bit of the backstory to Resilient and why, Black women supporting Black women is so important. My friend Amber Cabral was actually doing a D&I workshop for Amazon virtually, and this was after the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and they brought her in to do a D&I workshop.
D&I?
Yes, so that's diversity and inclusion for anyone that is not aware of D&I. And and they were having a conversation. She was having a conversation with everyone on this call, and someone that was listening in just happened to be a publisher and work at Wiley Publication. And she's listening to Amber talk, and she was like, you need to write a book about the work that you're doing. And in that conversation, they ended up doing her first book deal, and the publisher and editor was like, I'm looking for more women of color who are specifically writing about business, because there is a gap and absence of Black women, women of color writers, particularly in business. And Amber recommended me to her and Wiley. And so I interviewed Wiley, we had a conversation around just my story, and interestingly enough, I was thinking about writing a second book, but was going down a different route. And the call with Jan and I just went over so well. We kind of talked about the outlines of what I could foresee my book being, and I really wanted to share just my journey, and particularly my startup journey, which is a lot different than Solid Ground, which you and I talked about a year or so ago.
And kind of tell the audience the difference there, because you did have a company before Resilient and this book Resilient. I love that each company gets a book, right? Let's just keep that going, okay?
Yeah.
Solid Grounds has Solid Grounds the book, Resilient has Resilient the book, which I love. What is the difference in the 2 companies and the 2 books?
So Solid Ground was essentially supposed to be a no thrills, quick, down and dirty story about how I started my first company, but not how really I went step by step and did it, but generally how did I go from not knowing anything about business and understanding how to network, understanding how to meet clients, my first clients, understanding how to put together my first proposal. And so it was a lot of my first as it relates to just being in business. Whereas Resilient is, okay, now I have at least one business underneath my belt, and here I am trying to enter this whole new world, which is the tech space. And I feel pretty confident because I had did this other company, and so investors and other people who would generally need to support me may look to that, my previous experience, and say, okay, she did this, she may be able to do something else. But anyone, when you guys have opportunity to read the book, you'll find that it did not go smooth at all.
We're going to talk about some of those hiccups in a second. That is, I think, one of the things that makes you so relatable and I think gets people interested in your story. You didn't always know that you could work in tech. You didn't always picture yourself working in a business realm. You're very relatable. You were a Black woman trying to be successful. You didn't know exactly what realm that would fit in. Where's the moment for you when you were like, I am going to be an entrepreneur?
You know, they say that people ask the question, is entrepreneurship, being resilient or being scrappy, nature or nurture? For me, I think it's a little bit of both, but I do feel like it was in my nature to be an entrepreneur. And I can take you all the way back to LSU when I started. Look at me. I know about you now. Yep. When I started Black News Our Way, which is supposed to be like this online newspaper to bring together students from Southern University, students from LSU, to really stop the gap that existed between us, to write about common themes that existed between both of us, irregardless of the schools we went to. And so that was actually my first entrepreneur journey, or like my first time dipping my toe into that scene. And I basically recruited all of my friends as writers. Some of them are in this room. And, you know, I got another one of my friends who's on campus to do our photos in like the west side of campus. It was crazy. I don't know who we thought we were, but we were trying to build back then this company in like 18, 19.
And you know what was cool? I just read in the book last night that you said at first you didn't identify that until recently as the first time that you felt like you were being an entrepreneur company. It took looking back at your journey to be like, oh wait, I was starting something then, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, and I think that maybe when a lot of us look back to our college careers, we're like, man, that kind of was entrepreneurial, things that I put together, or things that I started. You know, I see Jared back there, he was slinging shirts back at
The whole audience has worked for her at some point, maybe.
So I think, you know, we would look deep down, we probably all have that entrepreneurial spirit, and we did something. We were definitely selling candy, right, for $1 growing up.
Yes.
So it's in us all, for sure.
I love that, and I think that's what makes you so relatable, especially in a time and space and place when entrepreneurship seems to be the thing. And we'll delve into, of course, the difficulties of that later. But you know, that's why I'm always like, I want to be an entrepreneur, Savitri, but I don't know what my business is going to be. For you, when you hear people say that, I have this entrepreneurial spirit, I have this idea, I understand in this book, part of your goal is to help people go from an idea to a business. What are the keys there when you have an idea, which I think everybody has ideas. The majority of us, that's it. It ends right there, right? I had a really good idea, right? You tell it to a friend and that's the end. How do you take that and actually turn it into a business?
So I think the first step is to conceptualize what your idea is, and then think about what it is that you need to actually begin to execute against that idea. A lot of times people get just stagnant in the process of trying to take their idea to product or their idea to fruition, primarily because they don't know what comes next, and they don't have someone to help them to figure out what comes next, and so they just stop altogether. But it's really being focused on what resources, what things do I need to be able to execute this thing to bring it to life. Because it solely won't just be on you. For me, I needed other people, I needed help in order to get both my businesses off the ground. And I think so many times people think that if they don't have solely on them what it takes to get their business off the ground, then maybe it shouldn't happen. Yeah. And it really does take more than just you as an individual to get something going, and then to also grow it. Now, it's obviously up to you to actually get that idea to a point where you can take it to someone and get some other people, other ideas, individuals trying to help you get things into place and what you need to get it going. However, I think initially people just never get to that point.
Yeah, there's, I think, a lot of intimidation in that process, a lot of nerves in that process. So if you have an idea, what point do you need to get to before you bring other people into it? I know we were supposed to do a pitch competition together recently, so you hear pitches from people who have business ideas. How developed should that be before you take it out to somewhere else?
Honestly, it depends on your comfort level, but also I think sometimes people have this idea or this notion that people are going to steal their idea, and so sometimes that hinders them from wanting to tell people about what they have going on. Sometimes people think that people are going to in many words, like crap on their idea and say, I don't think this is for you. But there's never a time that's soon enough. But if you're thinking about people like mentors, and you know, one of my mentors and advisors, Rod West, who's over at Energy, when I approached him, I asked him something very simple, and I was like, I need a guide in New Orleans, because I was fresh here, I was trying to connect to people. And he received that, but every time I went to speak with him, I had very direct questions, very direct things asked that I needed. And so sometimes people can talk to people about things, but they don't have anything tangible enough to give to that person where that they can actually help them. You know, so I think that's like a big thing. Like, how can you take something, an idea, and even if you're just speaking to people about it, you're having a conversation, maybe you're just talking to friends about it, but you also need to talk to people who aren't necessarily the closest to you, because you need people who are going to be honest with you, and they're going to tell you the truth about what you're doing, and they're also going to know enough about it to kind of help you think through what needs to happen next.
And is there such thing as a good idea and a bad idea, or is it just in the execution?
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of ideas that people thought were bad ideas that people executed, and they were like, oh, well, I guess that wasn't so bad, like 140 character tweet, right? And so there are a lot of things that people probably thought weren't good ideas, and so I do think that it's more of the process of execution than anything.
Sure, and we always talk about this. Making a business and making money is two different things. You mentioned being a Black woman, which I want to talk about more, and being in the business realm, but we talk about Black women being the fastest creators of business, the biggest growing group of entrepreneurs, but also not bringing in the money. So this is where you stand out, because I don't know where, you met most of these people working for you in college. I found out about you because on the internet, right, you made headlines for being a Black woman from New Orleans who got $1 million in venture capital. And I was like, I don't know what venture capital is, but I like this girl, right? Like, let me keep reading these articles and let me see more about her story. Why was that the thing that captivated people? Because I know you write in the book, you felt like you had bigger wings. Why was that what drew you literally national attention?
So I do feel that social media has changed the landscape of entrepreneurship, and headlines definitely catch people's attention. And it was, I guess, like 3 years ago now, and it was doing Essence, and a good friend of mine, Summer, had wrote an article about me raising capital for her blog, very small blog called The Distillery, and just so happened, because she released it during Essence, other major publications picked it up. And when they picked it up, it sent my story viral because I had raised capital, because I was a Black female, because I was in New Orleans. And people were like, how'd you raise that money down in New Orleans? Like, that in itself was a story to people, because so many times they tell you you have to go out to San Francisco or the Bay or wherever else, and that there's no capital here, which is a lot more now, but it's definitely not a lot here. And I think that people are inspired by that, and because it's something that they don't necessarily see often. And so I think that's why, like, the raising capital got the most attention. But I was like, hey, nobody really cared about me building this, 7-figure company solid ground. And I had done that for, almost 10 years before people really knew who I was outside of that.
Wow. And then I know you've posted about this before, about not being able to be prophet in your own land, talking about how people love the unfamiliar. You wrote about that in the book, so I know it's something that must, to some extent, have characterized a part of your journey. That must be disappointing, to be this successful and feel like the success has to come from the outside, not from people in New Orleans.
Yeah, I think that sometimes people notice you on the outside, and it takes people noticing you on the outside for people to notice you where you are. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs or people in business actually, or even their careers, they experience that. And there's a lot of different reasons, but I was actually quoting a biblical verse when I talked about that in my book, that oftentimes people feel like they're not supported where they are, and they have to go elsewhere to get support. And once they do, then people where they are support them.
Right.
And I talk about that in the context of business, because with SGI, I actually my largest contracts didn't come from Louisiana, but I was building a business in Louisiana. Louisiana was benefiting from me having a business and employing people here and doing work, but my largest contracts were coming from Connecticut, Atlanta, everywhere else. And so I talked about the concept of that. Now I don't have any issues, but I have to go out and get it and kind of bring it back.
What do you think was key in you being able to go out and get it and bring it back? Because it can't be that easy. Everybody's not doing it.
No, it's not. But I started meeting people along the way, and I think sometimes I never take for granted networks and the power of meeting people and not seeing. I hate to use the word building, right? Because people use that word, let's build together, and they're like, how do we not? What does that mean to you exactly? But I started meeting people along my journey, and they were in other cities, and they're like, oh man, could you help me with this, or could you help me with that, or I have this project I want to bring you in on, or can we partner on a project and go after a contract together, which is the case of my friend Zamara in DC, and those relationships started building and compounding, and it allowed me to grow my footprint in Louisiana. But there were certain things in Louisiana that I did that like opened up the landscape to me. One mayor, Sharon Weston Broom, she texted me probably a couple of minutes ago, congratulating me on my book tour. But one of the pivotal point I think in my career was also being on her race and her campaign and like really learning that like gritty in the mud, building from the ground up, grassroots type of building, and taking that and being able to continue to compound the work that I was doing outside of communications and public policy. So everything that I have generally learned has built upon like the next thing in my journey.
And you have stuck with Louisiana despite you saying you kind of had to go away to get the support because as the pandemic was starting, I think right before then we talked, you were just setting up your office in New York. But you were also saying like, I'm staying in New Orleans. Kind of talk about the importance of that for you. If this is not the place that's supporting you, nobody would be mad if you were like, okay, it's not working here.
And so the flip side of that is also in Louisiana, we're just limited with resources, right? And so going to New York, opening the second office in New York was my way of being able to take resources and bring it back home. Because one thing that I also realized is that, man, people don't have enough to support me the way I need to be supported. And so for me to change that dynamic and to ensure that we actually leave New Orleans and the places that we are better than which we found them is that we have to go out and get those resources and bring it back to people who were trying to come up and build things too. And so that's one of the reasons why I decided to, stay in New Orleans, continue to build New Orleans, and I love New Orleans, so it is what it is.
It's a beautiful thing, and we appreciate having you here. What would you say though to up-and-coming entrepreneurs who are struggling here?
Yes.
Do you tell them stay here, or do you secretly whisper, go do what you need to do, and then come back?
So there was this guy, he tweeted me. I think he did move back to New Orleans. And so he was tweeting me, people from Gonov, GOV. He was like, why should I come back to Louisiana? Because, this is why I left, because I couldn't get the support. But why should I come back? Because now people are starting to maneuver around, and people who have went off to like New York and LA are starting to return home. And so he was like, I want to return home. Like, people want to come back home. And he was like, but can I come back home and still have a thriving business? Or do I risk basically my business collapsing if I leave LA, because that's where he was in LA, to come back home? And I was like, so they started playing to people, and they tagged me, and they tagged some other people who were doing well here. And I was like, yeah, I think you can do well here. You have to identify resources really quickly, and you also have to be a part of an ecosystem that grows the culture and builds opportunities here for other entrepreneurs like yourself so that they can come home. Yeah. And so I think that is the dynamic that we also have in New Orleans. And a friend of mine, she ended up leaving her hometown, and I was like, man, open an office in New York, in New Orleans. And she's like, yes, I had to leave my hometown because if I stayed here, I would die here. Wow. Not meaning her physically, but her business would have died there. And so when you think about small towns or smaller cities that don't have the resources of other cities, that can oftentimes be like the perception that if I stay here, my business will die here. But we know that can't be true because Cleveland's sitting back there and he has a thriving business. So he's proven the elements are different, right?
Definitely.
Mine against others.
And we need you guys to show that the way is different. So I want to return back to the book title, why you chose Resilient. I know you've been through a lot of things, personal and professional. Let's start with the professional. Why is resilient the word that defines you feel like your journey?
So my company's name is also Resilia, which derives from resilient. So the book was my friends will tell you I was throwing out all these different names for a book. Very similar to how I was throwing out all these names when I was trying to name my company. And both times I just came back to resilient. And I think about like the word itself and like what it means to me, but it is this ability to like overcome all of these challenges, all these odds, and still make it out on top, right? And so when I came up with the name for the book, Resilient, it was like, yeah, this is it. And now I know the word resilient is like everybody's using the word because of COVID-19 and everything from 2020. So it's very timely, I will say. But then also it was like, oh, and how to overcome anything. I was like, yeah, there's like overcome anything, which is really anything. And for me, it was like, yeah, because even in failure, you have to overcome it. And I think that is a mindset of that you can't overcome anything. It doesn't mean that you're going to be successful in doing so, but it means that you can't overcome even failure.
And when you think back on your journey in a business sense, what was the moment that you were like, this is a fail? Maybe you even thought about quitting. What is that story?
Yeah, so I was talking to Kat Cole and interviewing her, and she was like the COO of Focus Brands, which is like, Cinnabon, Jamba, all of those big names. And she came from like a rural area in the South. She was raised by a single mother, like the whole nine as well. And we just kind of talked about just like the journey that we had gone on into really like getting our footing and getting where we are, and like the failures that we had faced during that process. And one in particular was like when I went out to raise like my seed round, which my seed round was like $2 million, which was the hardest round. Much harder than raising $8 million, which sounds crazy, but that $2 million seed round was the hardest round.
Because seed's the beginning.
Yeah.
I'm using context clues here. Okay.
Yeah. So
right.
Pre-seed, I raised $400,000 in my pre-seed round, and that was different because I had built my first company. I knew individuals. I had networked. I had met people along the way who could write me like $10,000, $25,000 checks, and so I was able to raise my pre-seed round fairly easy. But then when I moved to my seed round, because I couldn't access that capital here in Louisiana, I had to go outside of Louisiana, and that proved to be very difficult. But I'll tell you how I circled back to Louisiana, although the majority of my capital was raised outside in my seed round, is that I was pitching at New Orleans Entrepreneur League, Culture Pitch. A couple people were there, and you will know I did not win, but I thought I did well. And it was hosted by Jim Coulter, who is the CEO and president of TPG Capital, which is a private equity firm. They have like billions of dollars under management. And when during that process, they actually have like actual partners at TPG sitting on the calls with you and helping you pitch. One of the individuals that was on my call was actually Tim Milliken, who was a partner at TPG Capital. Now, obviously, this is not his league, right? He's in Series B, C, D, doing billion-dollar deals, but he's taking an interest in early stage companies from that level and like coaching them. And so I lost that Monday. I sent the email to everyone saying, thank you, I did not win, sorry to let the team down, but I appreciate you helping me. And he responded and said, when you're ever in San Francisco, look me up, would love to catch up, see where you are. I think you have a solid business. And a couple months passed by, I'm going to San Francisco. At this point, I'm like, I'm never gonna get this round raised. Like, this is it, this is the final. This is, the company's not gonna go past this. Happened, I got up with him, he responded immediately, got together for lunch, and he actually gave me the check. He wrote the check in my round that allowed me to raise the rest of the capital that I needed. And so in investing in venture capital, one thing that people will tell you is that investors signal. And basically that means that the investor who is real respected invests in your company, then it's a lot easier to get other investors to invest in your company. And because Tim was so well respected and he invested in my company, other investors wrote a check a lot faster than they would have, or maybe they wouldn't have wrote a check at all. And so Tim was really kind of the individual, and he didn't even write a big check. I raised $2 million, and his check wasn't even that large, but his name was. And that allowed me to turn my entire round around and raise the rest of the capital that I needed.
Let's talk about resilient in a personal sense, because I know in the book you talk about being a first-generation college student, the household you grew up in, wanting to make life better for your mother, and of course your mother passed, which I'm so sorry. And we've had this personal conversation before, I'll be real with the audience, that my dad passed about 2 years ago, and a similar feeling, like we were working really hard to give our parents better lives, and then when they're gone, you're like, why am I doing this? Like, what is the new purpose? You had to reframe your purpose, which I think especially for Black people, when you talk about being successful, there's always somebody you're doing it for, right? Like, it's just a common narrative. So talk about that point, reframing things and what you're working to be successful for now.
Yeah, I mean, I want to double down on that part that you just said. Like, being a Black entrepreneur, just being Black in general, there's always someone else you're doing it for. And I think that just that theme is so consistent across the board. And I think for me, it was definitely losing my mother lit a extended fire under me to say, okay, let me refocus and reshape what I am doing this for and try to define what I want like my legacy to be. And in many ways that began to shape as, okay, how can I help other people? And whether that's help other people be passionate and do the jobs that they have jobs that they like, right, and are passionate about, helping my community. You know, we heavily work with nonprofits. We still do work with foundations. And so the majority of my career has been spent in the community and working in the community to build really the spaces and places that I feel we deserve and the world that I feel we deserve to live in.
And I think that everyone appreciates that you have this sense of giving back, of owing something to others. Is there a story that stands out of you helping someone who like that was my younger self and now I can help them get over this?
Yeah, man, I have so many people. I'm like,
You probably have a
mentors. I have a lot of mentees, and I think about my mentees often. I was giving an interview and I was just talking about like one of my mentees, like EJ, who was in this program, Catch, Caring After Teaching Children Hope. And to this day, we're still connected. And he's like, Nancy, you really like just helped me so much in that. But I also look at like the power of other people who have created platforms to allow me to help people. And in that instance, that was my good friend Tyrus Thomas. And Tyrus doesn't get half the credit that he deserves of what he has done in the community to help other people, as well as give the platform to so many other people so that they too can help others.
Beautiful.
So shout out to Tyrus.
There you go. All right, guys, I'm going to open the floor to questions for you as we continue the conversation. So if everybody has something specific they want to address or a question about the new book, you guys can jump in at any point. All right? But we'll continue the conversation, so just raise your hand and I'll watch out.
Jared,
we got one? Oh, great. Come on.
So one of the things that I've been impressed with you about over the years is how you evolved. So starting from SGI to Resilia, I'm curious to hear a little bit more color about, you know, what pushed you to evolve in the way that you have. Like, what did you run up against, or what did you see that wasn't working, that was a good idea, or maybe a bad idea, but it wasn't the best idea, and how you got to where you're at now?
Yeah, I definitely think that my journey has tremendously evolved. I'm not even a technical founder of the tech, so it's like, how in the world did you get in tech? Most people would ask that or even wonder that. And I think about like where I started with SGI, and Jared and I actually used to laugh about this because we used to work with athletes, and working with athletes were like, it can be very challenging. And at some point I was like, you know what? I don't think I want to work with athletes anymore, and I don't think I want to do events anymore. Like, I'm not passionate about doing that side of the work that we were doing. And I always say, like, people who do events and logistics are like amazing people, and I realized that I didn't really like doing that. And I think a lot of my evolution boiled down to really figuring out what I love to do and what I did not like doing. And also things that I wanted to learn to do, right? Like be disruptive in tech. And I think back to when I first started my first company, some of the things that we were doing, in many ways trying to figure it out, because when you're starting a business, you are trying to figure out like the things that you're really good at and the things that you're not so good at. And when you're a agency, and we were an agency, we offered a lot of different services. And it really was me taking a step back and really taking a chance by resigning contracts. Like, I resigned tons of contracts because I just didn't enjoy doing it. And it became bigger than just money, because some people might have kept the contracts because, hey, you're cutting off a part of your revenue arm. But for me, I had to do that to be able to evolve. When I was working in SGI and I took a pivot to Resilia, I remember talking to my technical consultant, good friend Ishmael, and he said, Tavisha, if you're gonna do this for real, you gotta step away from SGI. And I was like, what do you mean? This is how I make money. Like, yeah, this is how I make money, so I eat. He was like, yeah, but if you really, really are going to give this company a fair shot, you're gonna have to focus on it. And you're gonna have to like put all of your focus and attention on it to really grow it and get to a place where it needs to be. And so I put a stake in the ground and said, well, that's what I'm going to do. And again, I started resigning contracts with SGI to be able to do that and focus on resilience. But a lot of the things that I have done have been very intentional, and me not being able to like see all the way down the road, but taking a chance and saying, this is what I truly want to do, and this is what I see like my future looking like. And for me to be able to do that, you know, something Oprah says, when you're trying to figure out what to do next, you just become really still and think about what's the next best step, and then make the next best step after that, and the next best step after that. And so I think a lot of times when I'm trying to figure things out, I go back to, do I actually like doing this? Like, I enjoy this? And try to make decisions based on things that I really want to do, and things that I feel motivated and really like empowered to keep moving forward on.
It seems like you enjoy it, do you?
Yes, I love what I do.
I always like to make sure, because
and when I don't, then I'll move on and do something else, right? And so I think that is definitely my mentality.
Any other questions, guys?
Yeah.
Hi, this is actually actually a personal question. I'm extremely proud of you. Congratulations. How do you care for yourself? So many Black women are they have this weight of being everything to everyone all the time, and you going, multiple states, multiple coasts. How do you care for yourself and not burn out?
So I do think like self-care is important, and I also am a big believer of therapy. So anytime I talk to my friends that have therapy, I'm like, why don't you have a therapist? Can we find one for you? I promise you it'll change your life.
Yeah.
And so I'm really big on therapy, and I was introduced to therapy via my line sister Renisha, who sought a therapist after her mother passed. And my mother passed years before hers did, and so I was late to the game. But she randomly texted me out of nowhere and said, I think you should, do you have a therapist? But I was like, no. She's like, I think you should look into it. And she's like, I'm gonna send you a couple of people in your area. And I don't know, it was like on her heart or her spirit to tell me that. And so I found a therapist, and definitely believe in therapy just from a state of, you don't have to always be hurting or down or whatever. I think most people think that you go to therapy because something's wrong.
Yeah, that's why they stray away from it.
Yeah, and I don't think so. Me and my therapist, we be like literally joked out on the phone. Seriously. Because all days don't have to be bad days, right? It could be like, listen to me, I'm gonna tell you what I'm thinking, what do you think about that?
Yeah.
And he'll be like, that don't sound, let me flip back to these pages. That don't sound like your why to me, right? And so like a reminder of like why you're doing the things that you're doing as well. And so I'm a huge believer in therapy. I'm definitely a spa girl, so that's just my thing. And because I was like in like a bad wreck like years ago, and so I definitely tell people, if you feel pain, get it checked out, go to a chiropractor. We have a resident doctor here, soon to be Heather. But get checked out, right? Because your health is so important to you, and you only get like one body. And that's something that I became very mindful of. Like you only get, one brain, one mind, one body, and so try to take care of it. But then on the other side of that, I also am very cognizant of the privilege that self-care in that way is, because there's not a spa day that's going to recover anyone who can't keep their lights on, right? And so, people are like, oh, Black women self-care. It's like, if money and your finances and not being able to pay your bills or feed your children is the issue, then there's no self-care in the world that's going to solve for that. And you have to think about, like, how do I fix that problem? Like, what are the challenges around? And some of that is like us, right? Society, government, and other things. But if you're in a position like your company is failing, you're trying to figure out how to keep your pay your next payroll, like those are other challenges that need to be talked through a different lens. And sometimes, I feel like we can like blanket self-care a lot of times when people aren't feeling good. Probably not feeling, I don't feel good if I can't pay people. That's a whole other reason why I'm not feeling good. Ain't no spot that ain't gonna hear that.
That I think is a great point. I always ask the self-care question too, so like a really successful woman, because I'm like, how are you doing it? I'm dying on the inside, right? And I think you make a great point that so often we're so run down trying to make it to the next thing. So I think a good question would also be, what do you do on those days when like there is no time for a spa day? You're like, I feel horrible, but tomorrow I have to be at this meeting. Is there something or something you tell yourself, something you do that gets you like through one more day? Just like, let me get to Friday, let me get to Sunday.
So I also like meditation. I use this headset that my friend Jason introduced me to called the Muse headset, and it's like $120 or so, or you can like buy them cheaper than on Amazon. And it allows you, a lot of people don't like meditation because they don't know how to do it, right? And I didn't either, because you know people like, oh, meditate. I sit there, I'm like,
I be thinking about food. Yeah, I always think about food. Always.
I've
tried.
Yeah. I'm trying to like, it
Always
work.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about what's next, like what my calendar, am I missing a
Do
meeting?
list. Yeah, no, I failed a million times.
Yeah, so I think about those things when it comes to meditation, but what the Muse headset does is that it recenters you and it calms you. And so when you put it on, for example, you have, if you lose focus, if I lose focus and I didn't have this on, well now I can do it without it, but if I lost focus and I didn't have like this Muse headset on, I would just do something else because I lost focus. If you lose focus when you have the headset on, you'll hear birds chirping, or you will hear sound like the wave of the ocean, like it louder. And so, or you might hear a train, right? And so whatever it is, it's telling you to recenter yourself. And when you do, the noise disappears. And so it's kind of cool in that way because it's like monitoring your head, your brain waves.
Definitely gonna try it because I've tried so many times. What's next, guys? Or I have one, you know, and listen, we started talking, I didn't even tell people who I was. I'm a morning anchor for WWL, that's how Savitri and I know each other. My name is Sheba Turk. So I interview Savitri all the time. She's one of my favorite people to speak with. And she knows when I write a story about her, I'm always following up with like, define this for me, or I'm Googling, like, right, to put it in layman's terms, because she's so smart, so brilliant, so deep in it. Sometimes I'm like, wait, Savitri, I don't know what that means. Wait, come back, right?
She was like, oh, so you're telling me it was that easy, huh?
Yeah, listen.
Yeah,
I will never feed it to the audience if I don't understand it. So she makes me do a lot of research, which I appreciate. And so one of my questions for today that maybe some of the audience members have is you talk about bootstrapping a company, venture capital, raising capital. What's the difference in the ways you get money for a company?
I mean, there's a number of ways to get money for a business. Going back to how social media has changed things, I think that people are like, oh, I need an investor. But I always tell people, if you can bootstrap for as long as you can, you'll be in a better position.
And that means using your own money,
Yeah,
getting it
so
from other people.
bootstrapping is definitely using your own money. So it's taking what you have in your pockets, what you have in your savings, or money that you can put aside from your check, which most people probably know the bootstrap journey. That's like the journey most travel because most people don't have additional resources they can put into their company unless they have like a family member who can afford to write them a check to get started. And some people their family can give them a little bit to get started, but they're like, all right, I'm gonna give you this, but you're on your own after this. And bootstrapping is the majority of entrepreneurs' journey, and that's very different than raising capital. And so raising capital today, even that looks different. I went the investor route, and so essentially selling off shares and equity in my company. And so I always say, you know, you start with 100%, and as soon as you start taking money, you're giving that 100 goes to 90, then 80, and so on and so forth. But the better you are positioned to take on capital, the more control you can retain in your company. And I think that overall, you're just in a better position if you understand the dynamics of what investment capital means to your company. And there's also things like crowdfunding, which has come like really popular over the past several years, but particularly over the past 2 years because of the Obama administration. Now you can crowdfund through a very specific regulation up to $5 million, like through the crowd, which had never been possible before. I've never crowdfunded before, but I know a lot of friends who have, and I always tell people, you know, you have to do what's best for like your company and what's best for you. I don't know how they do it, all these investors. Personally, I'm like, how do y'all keep track of all these investors? But there are ways to do that as well.
Awesome. My reference for that is Shark Tank. Y'all watch Shark Tank? Yeah, so like you'll give away a percentage of your company from mine, and I'm always like, I would give it all to you because I don't understand like 70 from 20. But
Exactly.
Sure, you can have it.
definitely be giving it all.
Yeah,
away.
right.
I was like,
So,
oh my God. that's
If
a
you
bad
don't
deal.
know this stuff, but you have a great idea, you could definitely ruin it, right? In the number sense, what are resources if you don't understand that financial capital part, which is the important part at all, where you can learn about it before you make a mistake like give away 50% of your company?
Yeah, so I talk about it a little bit in my book, but I also have like additional resources on my website, savitrawilson.com. I also tell people to go to like Y Combinator. Y Combinator.com is a space where they're kind of like the OGs in venture capital, like early stage. And so that's another space that you can go to. Firstround.com is another resource that you can use to like really, really learn what you're doing. And particularly I find that early on founders, this is why I say like it's harder for you if you have to take money when your back is against the wall, because people can basically give you the terms that they want. And then also if you don't know any better, you might give someone 30% of your company for $100,000, because $100,000 sounds big in the beginning, but very quickly you realize it's not a lot of money, and you've given away a huge chunk of your company.
Did we have a hand up? Yes.
Hello. I want to take it back a little bit. Talking about being a first-generation college student, I work with a lot of youth. How did that experience impact your journey from the beginning to kind of reflect right now?
Yes, so I don't think I would be where I am if I didn't have my journey as a first-generation college student. I just feel like I was more scrappy. I was more just, I'm gonna figure it out, even if I have to figure it out and get things out the mud. And so I do believe being a first-generation college student, I knew very early on, even when I went to college, like at some point I realized, wait, my mom was not gonna be able to afford to send me to college. And so I started applying for all these scholarships and these grants, and I started receiving them. Although I wasn't the top 10 in my class, like my best friend is way smarter than me, and she was like, how are you getting all these scholarships? One thing that I realized is the power of referrals. And so earlier I talked about like networks, and if I could go back and read some of the references that my teachers gave me, you would understand like how I beat out some of these other students who had done way better than me grade-wise, right? And so I think you can never just diminish the power of like that impact of people in your lives, irregardless of your circumstances and where you come from. And I do feel that it is because I was a first generation college student, because I just saw the world so much differently. And I also didn't see anything in my way. And I talk to friends and their parents like, you need to be a doctor, you need to be an attorney, you need to be this, you need to be that, because they want them to be secure and to have a good job. I also never had, my family never said, go do that, right? They always just provided the foundation of I can do anything, and you can do anything you put your mind to, and thus I never really had any barriers preventing me from kind of creating this world and really defining the path for myself. And I think being a first generation college student actually created that landscape for me.
That's wonderful for you to be resilient. What do you feel like are some of the things along the journey as you built this resilience, you identify in other people? Because I'm sure, right, like you were looking at things now with a trained eye. If somebody were like, Savitra, I don't know if this is for me, maybe I should go be a doctor. I prefer a traditional path. I want my check every 2 weeks or whatever, right? Or should I dive into this idea?
Yeah, my brother is that way. So I'm a serial entrepreneur. I am like 100% entrepreneur till I die. My siblings are not. My cousins right here, they will tell you my siblings are not that. They are not entrepreneurs, and they're fine. They're okay with that, and they don't want to see any other path outside of that. But I think there is opportunity to have ownership, irregardless of where you are, right? And so I think the difference is that I could be an entrepreneur and I own my company. You could be a doctor or a lawyer or whomever, and you can own a part of my company, right? And so I think it's not necessarily about pushing entrepreneurship, more so than it's about pushing ownership, right? And I think that, and like the creation of like wealth and the other pathways that you can do the things that you're passionate about. And I had a podcast episode called Everybody Doesn't Want to Be an Entrepreneur. And I brought on my friend Phil, and he is exec at Amazon, and he talks about this. He was like, I don't want to wear all the hats. Like, I'm straight like that.
My one job, my one title. Yeah.
Like, I don't like it. But he also believes like in ownership and idea. My brother works at Valero, and you know, my brother likes investing in stocks. He probably has like a couple $1 million buried in the backyard that he won't touch because he's like super tight. But you know,
in the mattress.
He's been investing since he was in the military. You know, making probably like $32,000 a year. But that's just his way of looking at ownership differently. And because of that, he sees significant returns. And so I think it's about what are the opportunities that we have in our community to build wealth, irregardless of the path that we have taken.
Any other questions right now? We brought up several comments about being a Black woman in an industry where there's not a ton of Black women. What does that feel like now, present day, that you were successful? Because I know from the outside, some people think that heals everything, right? Do you still walk into rooms and people treat you differently, talk to you differently? I'm asking this, I know the answer. But I just want to hear what you have to say.
How?
In any way, do you feel that because you were a Black woman in the industry where you don't see a ton of you, when they talk to you like you don't know what you're talking about?
Yeah, I think that now, because of the climate, people are cautious about how they talk to people. However, it definitely isn't always like that, and the rooms always change. People who are not as cognizant of what's going on. And yeah, there's been like so numerous of times where I've been in rooms, particularly at investor tables, where people were talking to me like, literally, like I had no clue of what I was doing. And they would say things, they're like, well, where did you get that information from? I'm like, the IRS's website? Like, what? Like, I would just name places and spaces that I'm speaking to because I'm a type of person, I'm gonna come with the facts, right? And I'm gonna back up facts with statistical information. And so when I'm like, I would riddle this stuff off and then people would have to like eat their words, right? And so it's just like, sometimes you have to go into places prepared because people will knock you off your own game just because they have already have a perception about who you are and who you're showing up as.
How do you overcome that? You know, we always have a story, we laugh, but after a while that does wear down on you when you always walk into a space and have to prove yourself, and everyone doesn't have to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of chalk it up to just the idea that, hey, we could talk about like things not being fair. We could talk about, you know, missed opportunities. But at the end of the day, if you have a goal and you're trying to get to something, you have to push through all of those barriers to get to what you're trying to get to, right? And so I do think that whether or not you've been in a room and people receive you, maybe that's not the right room for you to be in. And you need to go to a better room that receives you. Because there's a lot of resources, there is a lot out here, and we have to figure out like how to get to it.
Any other questions right now? You're taking your mask off. You're asking a question, or you're just breathing? You're just breathing. I'm sorry. It's pandemical times. It's confusing. Let's talk about this book. If someone reads it, who was the person you had in your mind reading the book, and what do you want them to take away from it?
So for me, it's about entrepreneurship, but it's also about telling people who come from places where I came from that if I could do it, being Black, being a woman, being from the South, being a solo founder, being non-technical, I have a lot of like, you can't make it.
Yeah.
I guess
Here you are.
So I think that if I can do that, then anyone can, right? And I always say that in relationship to like Beyonce's quote, she was like, oh, if my country ass can do it, you can too. And that's how I feel. I feel that exact way. Because like anything really is possible. Again, it's just about aligning the right resources, the knowledge, and understanding like the educational part that you have to acquire to be able to do something. And I think that is critical. And my book is not only like my journey and my story of what certain things that happened to me along the way, but this is what I did next. Right, and so this is the journey. This has almost got me down, but these are the actionable steps that I took to get this done.
Was there a hard part in writing for you?
Yes, this is different. Like my first book was so different from this because
It was, and
it
that's why I
was-
asked that. That one was more like, here's what happened exactly.
Yeah.
This one has more emotion, more story, which I really appreciate. That's why I wondered if it was more difficult to write.
It was a lot difficult, and I definitely underestimated just like the entire writing journey. And I was like, oh, if I do this again, I know, even from my first book, every time you write something, you learn something different. And I think I learned so much about just what it takes. And I have definitely appreciation for people who wrote many books. But writing a book is definitely not easy. But trying to get everything out in order in ways that it would be like received by the audience that I was trying to reach was probably the most challenging part for me.
What do you, I'm sure you've gotten some response already from pre-reads and stuff you sent out to people. What are you hearing?
Well, I'm definitely hearing a lot of things. One is, I feel like you're talking to me, which is, I feel like that's a good thing. The other is, okay, I'm thinking about raising capital, and it's been really helpful for me to understand, like, I don't have to start where I thought I was, had to start. Or, I actually don't have to, like, move to this place where I was previously going to move to it. Or I was about to accept an offer into a programming accelerator, and you actually told me that I could negotiate the equity that I was about to give up, right? And you gave me tactics to go do that. And so even within these short few days, people have like pinged me with like little things.
That's amazing. That must feel really good.
Yeah.
What is next for you? Because I think the enjoyable part of watching your journey is like you're at a high and we still see so much more to come for you, which I think is so beautiful. What do you see next? Another company, another book?
Yeah, my investors were like, yeah, we like you writing a book. Don't lose too much focus now. So I'm definitely like, after this, I'm like, okay, I need to go send off some emails and get some things over to one of my investors after this. But for me, it's just really staying focused on like continuously growing Resilia, getting us to our next milestone. Continue to grow our team. We've definitely been growing pretty substantially over the past year. And also continue to double down on the work that we're doing here in New Orleans and the team that we're building here in New Orleans as well. I've also been able to like invest more, so that's been really cool to do more investing in other companies and businesses of people that look like me. And so yeah, that's been some of the things that I've been looking forward to and will continue to do here on out.
Nice. And you've mentioned several people who were important to your journey throughout, I think particularly early on. Who are some of the people you still talk to now or look to as mentors, even if it's someone you don't really know?
So I definitely look to people that I do and don't know. I've named a couple of my mentors already and advisors. Someone I talk about in the book is Dr. Leonard Moore, who used to teach at LSU, who's now at UT Austin. He's very influential in my life, primarily just setting the tone of when you do things that you love, you don't have to watch the clock, right? And so I was very cognizant of that in building my own journey and career. But then, I look to other people that I have never met before, like Melody Hudson and kind of what she's done on public boards. And so I have a lot of people who I look up to. And I don't think you necessarily always have to touch someone to be inspired by someone.
Definitely, because that's what you're doing, right? There's so many people I'm sure who have read about you, inspired by you, will never meet you, and you are still their inspiration, which I think is so cool. Like you say, your investors are like, oh, you took the time to write a book. I think it's so interesting. You could just be in the business world, and that's it. And we don't hear from you on stages. We don't read your book. What makes you feel like, let me take a second from raising all this money, because she raises all the money, right? And to write these books and inspire other people, because it would be fair if you say, listen, I don't have the time to do that until 2 decades from now.
Yeah, so it really was kind of going back to my friend Summer, writing that article, and then more people becoming aware of what I was doing. And so I would get all these DMs and LinkedIn messages and you name it. Or people would even walk up to me on the street and like ask me questions. And so my first book was like, okay, I'm gonna put together something and really take from the questions that people were asking me. And even in like the book that, even in Resilient, I did the same thing. And so it's like, what are the commonly asked questions that a lot of entrepreneurs or founders or people who are starting up ask me? What are the common things that people often ask me to speak about? How can I collectively bring together my story and actionable advice and put this in a book that may help someone that previously wouldn't have understood how to go about it. And also give me something that I wish I had when I was raising capital. I was like, I didn't really have access, and I definitely didn't have anyone that looked like me telling me their journey, just because there was so few of us.
Sure. And you talked about in the book, like you're writing this, you talked about this tonight, writing this at a time when we're talking about this pandemic, which has mainly affected minority businesses. We talk about this every day on the news. And then I saw you added in a part about the death of George Floyd and, of course, the racial reckoning that we're dealing with in America. Talk about those things in light of your book and the conversations you want to have surrounding that.
Yes, so we often, if you're part of my company, I remember one of my team members are very diverse. So my team is super diverse, white, black, Asian, Hispanic, you name it. And I was giving a talk right after the murder of George Floyd about my conversation with my mother, because I went to very predominantly white schools like majority of my life. And I'm like, my mom was hating me because you put me with these kids who hate me, right? Like this racism, I was around racism at a young age. And my mom's like, oh, you belong here too, right? And so that is like a sentiment that I spread throughout my entire company, even in the dealing most recently with the Asian American and Pacific Islander hate that they're receiving, and having conversations with my team and actually asking them how can I best support you? Because many of them showed up for the black team members and other brown team members on our team doing after George Floyd, as well as Brown Taylor and others. And so for me, one of my team members, I was giving this talk about my mother and just going through all these different things as a kid. And because I was talking about it so openly, she said that she was just like, her fists were like this clenched because she had never been a part of a company where people talked about it. And so she was nervous for me, thinking that maybe people would receive it well. Yeah. And I was like, oh, well, they were in the wrong company. See, that's the benefit of, owning your company. Like, just imagine people not receiving my story, my personal story well. I was like, well,
you can quit my company, right?
Yeah, and so it was, but she felt that because it was a natural reaction, because she had never worked for a black woman before, and she had never worked for a black woman who had employees that looked like our team. And that's like, white men answer to me, black men answer to me, black women answer to me, Hispanic men answer to me, and that's normal, and it should be normal.
It absolutely should. I think that is a beautiful place to end. So we're all gonna buy copies of this book and give them away to friends, because I know we all family and friends in the audience, so we got our cute little packages, right? Okay, so we're gonna buy them and give them away. Where can we get the book?
So you can buy the book. It's available today at anywhere books are sold. So Target, Amazon, bookshop, shop local. Shout out to my mom on the back. Please shop local and shop black if you can. I have all my links on my website, on my Instagram page. But books are out everywhere.
Awesome. And before we wrap up, let's give it up for B Mike for having such a beautiful conversation in a beautiful space. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. And give it up for Savitri Wilson.